So, what exactly is self-care? Is it an excuse to get a massage, eat comfort food, go shopping? I think it's really potentially a lot deeper than that, a lot more meaningful than that. I think it's about our emotional stuff, and I think we need to deal with it as emotional stuff. Now, that may not surprise you. I'm Dr. Stephen Brownlow. I'm the founder of Adept Psychology. I'm the author of Emotions in Psychology and Psychotherapy. So you may think, well, of course it has to do with emotions, but just bear me out here a second. This whole idea came up. It really came up in an interaction I had the other day with somebody, and we were having a conversation. She's a therapist, and what she was finding is that her clients, over time, she'd attracted a group of clients, but the clients had a lot of the struggles that were similar to struggles that she had gone through fairly successfully earlier in life, which is typical. It's kind of how coaches and therapists attract clients. We kind of work on things that as we master them, we help other people master them. And so that part is okay. But what she was finding was that she was really burning out because there was just this level of raw emotion that it was reminiscent of stuff that she had gone through, and it was just more than she could deal with right at this point, she thought. And it reminded me of the first time I really burned out, the only time I really, really burned out. And it was way back, my first job out of the university, after I graduated back in the 80s. And what I did at that point, I worked at a long-term residential treatment center for adolescent boys. I mean, so we'd have these like 15, 16-year-old kids, typically for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. I don't really do that kind of stuff anymore, but in those days they did, and it was a great place to learn if you got good training, and I did, and the things that I learned then that I'm still unpacking and putting to use. But anyway, what I discovered really quickly, and one thing I should say is the way that our schedule was set up. I was working hourly. I was a direct care worker, and the way our schedule was set up was really that we'd have 1 week where I basically was at work all week, 24 hours a day. For most days, 5 days out of 7, I was there 24 hours a day. And then the next week I was only there 1 day for 16 hours or sometimes 24. And so it got to be, it was the 1 week was really intense, and then 1 week was resting up from the intense week. And what I found was really quickly that I was having all these really deep, painful emotions, intense emotions that I wasn't used to. Now, it's different than the lady who was talking to me, but these were things that I wasn't really used to. It was a lot of like psychotic fury and intense rage and all of this kind of stuff, and just gut-wrenching kind of stuff. It just rip you apart. And I remember going in and talking to the social worker or something, and it's like, oh, I'm dealing with this kid, and I'm feeling like this, and I'm feeling like this, and I'm feeling like doing this to this kid, and the social worker would say, oh, that's so good. You're understanding the kid. The kid's helping you understand how he feels all the time. And I remember, and meanwhile, my body's falling apart. I'm sick all the time, it felt like. And I'm not usually a sick person, but I was like running fevers and just feeling like crap. And it was like, at some point, it's like, I don't really care about how that kid feels. I care about how I feel. And right now, I feel like hell. Tell me how to do something about it. Well, they never told me that. They never told me how to deal with it. It was just, oh yeah, well, it's good because you're understanding the kid. And I thought that was the worst advice I'd ever heard, and it was the worst feedback I'd ever heard. And it was like, why can't somebody help me? And finally, I don't know, it was maybe 6 months, 8 months into doing this, it occurred to me what I was being told. I'd heard it over and over and over again. You understand what he's feeling. He's feeling, not what you're feeling. It's what he's feeling. He's helping you understand how he feels. And once it finally sunk in what I was hearing, then I realized this feeling isn't mine. I don't have to own it. I don't have to do with it. I don't have to figure out anything about it. What this kid's doing is helping me understand how he feels. And that allowed me to take a step back. And then I started realizing what he feels is crazy. And it's not how I feel. And how do I get from where I am? What would my life have to be like to have the same crazy feeling that he has? And then if I tied myself off with a lifeline, tied a lifeline around where I am and dove in and swam out to get him where he is out in the middle of Crazyville and pulled us both back into where I started, with that, I'm not the sanest person in the world, but I'm certainly better off than he is. I mean, I'm not being locked up for a couple of years in a place for disturbed adolescents, so I'm clearly doing better than he is. That's got to be better for him, right? I started kind of figuring out how to do that. And the step that I learned and sort of devised for myself, and what I advised to this client the other day, is the way that you do that is you establish what I call a baseline. And the baseline is, I know how people act around me. I know how I feel when I have interactions with people. I know the range that I usually feel. And so if I'm having an experience and my feelings are in that range, if my emotions are in that range, if my experience of other people reacting to me is in that range, then that's probably about me. But if I'm going out and all of a sudden I'm having an interaction with somebody where I'm feeling some way completely different than I ever remember feeling, or I'm all of a sudden experiencing emotions when I'm around another person that are very foreign to anything that I remember ever experiencing before, that's probably not about me. That's about them. And that's when I need to stop and take that as information. What is it that they're telling me about them? What is their behavior and how I'm feeling in this relationship telling me about them and how they function in relationships? And so there's a big piece of self-care, in my opinion, in understanding and doing things to separate yourself, to separate your identity from other people's emotions. Now, we get into problems because as young kids, most of us, especially if you're pretty sensitive like I am, we pick up stuff all over the place. We all do, whether we're sensitive or not. Sensitive people seem to pick up and identify with it more, but we pick it up from parents, we pick it up from grandparents, we pick it up from other family members, we pick it up from, could be teachers and ministers and who knows who all. We pick up stuff from other people all the time. And when we're little, we don't really understand that it's not us. And so at some point, there's a lot of stuff, and that leads to a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of stuff that in later years, we have to give back and say, wait, that was never mine. I always assumed that was mine, but that was never mine. Let me give that back. But before we can do that, it's like if we're in a sinking ship, the first thing you quit doing if you're in a sinking ship is you quit taking on more water. You figure out how to get the water out, to pump it out, to patch the hole, to do something. You quit taking on water. And so right now, when we're in situations and other people are giving us their emotions and wanting us to carry them for us, we need to quit taking on water. If we take on their water, then we're going to sink. And then we're no good to ourselves, and we're certainly no good to them. So, I'm Dr. Stephen Brownlow. How does this fit into your life? Where do you see this in your experience? Where do other people feed you their emotions? What kinds of social situations do you get into where all of a sudden you go in and you end up feeling a completely different way than you ever wanted to or ever do unless you're with those people? Can you figure out what your own baseline is and say, wait a minute, this isn't mine, this is yours. You're telling me about you. Because remember, self-care is up to you. Your emotional life is up to you. The power is and always has been yours.